Thanks everybody for taking the time to join me on this. I wanted to spend a few minutes and walk through what the FDU Center for Artificial Intelligence is, how it could potentially help you, and then demo and have you try out some of the AI tools that myself and many others at FDU have found very useful in the classroom. So I'm gonna share my screen here and let me know when you can see it.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so who we are. We have a website now. We are the Center for Artificial Intelligence. We have folks from all six colleges. We are actively developing tools that faculty and staff and administrators can use, developing curriculum and creating a undergraduate AI certificate that students can take and graduate with, developing an industry advisory board, again with representatives from all six colleges to help advise us in our curriculum development and in our faculty support. We're hosting events. We develop custom agents and GPTs for folks upon request. And we have a YouTube channel where we make video tutorials and guidance. So I just want to show you what that looks like. Here's the center website. As you go through, we have these custom GPTs that we've made, for instance. These range from research and scholarship to writing, proposal writing for grants, and a bunch of other ones that are currently in development. They range from Fred GPT for some to ChatGPT for others to Gemini to Perplexity, whichever LLM makes sense for the application we are developing in, and creating helpful chatbots and assistants. So just some examples of them. We have one where when you're writing a grant proposal, it will help you develop a logic model for an NSF or a USDA grant, for instance. We have others where when you're writing a manuscript, it will help brainstorm your scientific methodology and ask questions about your experimental design and help you kind of flush out any issues. When you're writing manuscripts, if you're stuck on the limitation section, we have one that just reads your manuscript and suggests a number of limitations that you might not have thought of when you're writing your manuscript before publication. As you scroll down, we have our YouTube channel again, where we have a number of tutorials. Up at the top, we have the tools. So here's a curated list of a number of different tools that we suggest that the FDU community should be aware of, and quick blurbs and links to each one. So what is Fred GPT? What is Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, that kind of stuff. Down here, if you want to do image generation, here are some tools that we would recommend. Audio and video generation, here are some tools we recommend. And then kind of the meat and potatoes of today's discussion, what tools should you use for teaching and research, right? So what tools would we suggest our faculty to use? And specifically, the majority of the demo I'm going to show today is ChatGPT as well as Notebook LM, which is a Google AI platform. Um, and then we also have uh, our events. So there is a AI symposium on April 15th that you are all invited to and encouraged to attend. Um, we have over 60 speakers. We have a plenary with presentations from a number of board members and industry partners. We have presentations from all three FDU campuses, seven different ICUNJ partner institutions. We have five different separate technical tracks, many of which are running concurrently, so you won't be bored if one or two of them don't interest you. One in health, one in teaching, one in technical foundations and engineering, one in ethics, and one in arts, humanities, and creative media. And then we have between 10 and 15 student lightning talks. Right now we have about 230 attendees that have confirmed, so it should be a big event. We're providing lunch, so if possible, we would encourage you all to attend. I just wanted to spend a few minutes before we actually get into the kind of demos, talking about kind of an intuitive approach to generative AI and what it is and what it isn't and what to be aware of. I promise it's only like 2 or 3 slides. We'll get through it quick. And my apologies in advance to the computer science folks. Just know that for the computer science folks, like I'm doing this from an intuitive standpoint, so I understand that probably 50% of what I say isn't quite right, but it's close enough to get people an understanding of how these systems work. So please forgive my kind of glossing over a lot of details. But generally, when we're talking about Gen AI, we're talking specifically about LLMs or large language models. So we're talking about the text-based systems. And these are what we refer to as GPTs or generative pre-trained transformers. Specifically, it's generative because it generates text. It's pre-trained because it's trained on data. For most of these models, it's most of the internet at this point. And then transformer, where it takes these inputs, does a bunch of math and predicts what the output should be. So I think most people kind of understand the generative part, they understand the pre-trained part, but the transformer part is a little murkier. Um, so generally what this system does is you feed it a bunch of text and it predicts the next word, right? And it does this based on all of its training. So again, kind of skipping over a lot of the details, one way to think about how these systems are trained are you feed it an entire Wikipedia article except for the last word, and then you have it guess that last word. And then you feed it another article except for the last word, and you have it guess that last word. And over time, it develops a pretty good ability to guess what the next word is from a probabilistic standpoint, right? So that's all these systems are doing. There's no fact checking. There's no ground truthing. It is purely, for the most part, um, predicting what the next word should be based on the training data. So if you ask, ChatGPT or Gemini a question in the back end, one way to think about it is it writes a prompt that says, somebody asked this question, you are a helpful AI assistant, your answer is blank, and then it just starts guessing words, right? Um, Again, just a general understanding of what this is. Um, and so there's a lot of implications here when we talk about how these systems work, right? Um, Specifically, that depending on the data that it's trained on, you're going to have different predictions and different biases. And depending on which system you're using, it's going to give you different results. And if you ask it the same question a number of different times, it's going to give you a number of different answers, right? This is a probabilistic model. It's not a deterministic model. One other key caveat to all these systems is that they're not coded in the traditional sense, like we talk about coding of computer programs. It's more akin to selective breeding, right? If you think of like plants or animals, selective breeding, you pull forward the models that work and get rid of the models that don't. And you, with that, develop these preferable characteristics, but there are some negative characteristics that may come along for the ride in this evolutionary process that may not be to the benefit of the user, right? So you hear a lot about hallucinations of models. That is one of the things that came along for the ride and we're kind of stuck with, right? So, so just wrapping up the kind of intuition of these systems is that like the training source really does matter. And with that, there's a lot of biases built into these systems, right? So remember that these systems are trained based on the internet. And if there's one thing everyone agrees on when it comes to the internet, it's that very few people on the internet ever admit they don't know something, right? So we shouldn't expect our GPTs or our LLMs to ever admit they don't know something. They're going to bake in that bias based on the training data. There's going to be some unintended outcomes that you have to be cognizant of and look out for. And the more information you give it, the better it is going to do at guessing the output, right? So if you give it a vague prompt, you're way less likely to get a good answer than if you give it a very specific and detailed prompt. So any questions before we kind of go on to the actual how do we use this? Going once, going twice. All right. So um, let's talk first for faculty members, Gen AI in research and grants. So some of the trainings and workshops and services that we provide for faculty are custom FredGPT agents. So we have a bunch that are currently out. If you go to FredGPT now, there's probably 5 or 6 in there. There's a bunch that are in the works that should be out in the next few weeks. And you are free to request custom agents. So if there's a part of your job that you think an LLM will help you with, send me an email. I'm more than happy to work with the FredGPT team to develop these custom GPTs for you. Um, we're always looking for more applications, so please don't hesitate. If you have a GPT idea, we'll test it out. If it doesn't work, we'll toss it. If it works, then the whole FDU community can benefit. So I encourage you to reach out with any suggestions there. And then we also have a bunch of upcoming workshops and videos that we're developing specifically for faculty that might be of interest to you. So we're developing a faculty Gen AI training module. So faculty will be able to take a multi-part training course and get a training certificate like of completion from that. Um, we're developing workshops on how to create a grant proposal and use Gen AI as a writing partner, with an emphasis on using it ethically, right? So we don't want these LLMs to do our work for us. We want to use them as a thought coach and a writing partner to develop this with our voice and our ideas, but just do that more efficiently. And then there's another workshop that might be of interest to you. It's Gen AI and your commute, which is talking about all the different ways that you can use LLMs and Gen AI to make use of your commute time. So I know, like, I personally have 45 minutes to an hour of a drive each way to campus. Um, Most of the time on my commutes, I am either having a conversation with Gemini about a manuscript that I'm working on, where before I leave the house, I load in the manuscript and then we talk about rewriting different sections. And you can do that purely verbally with a conversation with Gemini, or I have a Google Scholar alert where every week it gives me publications in my research area, and then I create AI generated podcasts that I can listen to on the drive to work and stay up to date with my research field. All stuff that you can do in the car safely to make use of that time. And then again, we're always open to workshop requests. If somebody's interested in a specific tool, somebody's interested in a specific use case, more than willing to work with you to develop a workshop, and then we record it, we post it on the YouTube channel, and then all of the FDU community can refer to that, and it's beneficial to everybody. And then kind of the focus of today is Gen AI in the classroom, and the use cases that we're going to cover are how to make your life easier. So how to use Gen AI to help you make quizzes, slideshows, mind maps to better understand the content you're teaching, making students more prepared with video explainers and AI generated podcasts, increase equity with multilingual support, guide students and their thought processes to make them more deliberate in their decision making. We do that through virtual TAs and custom assignment GPTs that I can show you, or I will show you, and then helping self-assess teaching with custom GPTs. And with that, I'm going to switch over to go through each one of these. So the first tool that I think is really useful for everyone to know is called Notebook LM. I'm sure a bunch of you are already familiar with it, but just want to kind of do a deep dive on it and talk about some of its use cases in the classroom. So it's a Google product, like I said. You go to notebook.lm.google.com. And if you want to create a new notebook, you simply create new notebook. Takes a little bit, so I just kind of pre-made one and I'll show you what it looks like. So here I've uploaded my OER textbook and it is in my source panel here. I can add additional sources, either PDFs or Word documents, or I very often include my slideshow presentations, my homeworks, my exams, all of my course material I put into this source area. You can also include websites, you can include YouTube links, you can have everything in your Google Drive, so on and so forth. So that's your sources tab here, and this is where we upload all of the knowledge for our AI to use. Next, we have a chat window. This chat window is very similar to any other LLM chat window like ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity, except that it is kind of quarantined by our knowledge, right? So if I ask it a question, it's only going to refer to these sources, not the general internet, right? So we have less chance of it hallucinating. And I can give it parameters and I can give it guidance on um, how I want it to respond. And so by doing that, I can create this, or I can use this chat to create what I refer to as a virtual TA. So for my classes, I take this chat and I give it very clear instructions. And my instructions are pretty long-winded, but generally speaking, I have it not give out answers and act as a Socratic tutor where it responds to student questions with leading questions to help them think through the problem on their own. I have it totally avoid all math. So I don't want it doing math. I want it focusing on high-level conceptual understanding. Um, and I have it not answer questions directly if it says, what's the answer to page 7, example problem 6? But what it will do is say, hey, if you're stuck on that, maybe go look at page 14. Or, hey, maybe go look at chapter 7.2.3. That might help you, right? So guiding the student in the right direction. And um, you can give that guidance to the chat by clicking on Configure Notebook and giving it detailed instructions there. Once I've set this chat and I can test it out here, and I've created essentially this chat to be a virtual TA, I can go to Share and I can create a link here. So I can copy that link and I can give it chat only access, which means the students don't have access to my source material and the students don't have access to my studio, which we're going to talk about here in a minute or two. They only have access to this chat. And then I simply, in course information, add in a link to that virtual TA. So the student clicks on this, they go into that chat that is informed by the textbook and the course material, and they can ask it questions. So I always encourage them to come to office hours if possible, but sometimes, it's 1 a.m. or midnight and they're stuck on a problem and they can use this.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Um, so are you asking students to use this particular virtual TA, not general GPT?
Yes, I am encouraging students to use this. So ChatGPT is going to search the web, right? It's not going to
Right.
search my course material.
Mhm.
So this is a more efficient way for them to get to the answer because this is trained on my course material.
Mhm.
So they prefer this and it keeps them kind of in a sort of walled garden ecosystem.
I see. Then if they do that, does it automatically generate the chatting log so that I can check what was the conversation?
Yeah, so we'll talk about that in a bit. I do that both here and with ChatGPT, where with all assignments, I have students with the assignment also print the chat log
Mhm.
and submit that chat log. And that's really helpful for two reasons. One, I think it's great to see um, that they are using it in a reasonable and ethical way. And if they're over reliant on it or trying to, kind of cheat the system, I can sit down with them and say, hey, maybe back off here, or um, maybe don't ask these types of questions. Think through it on your own. And like the struggle is helpful sometimes, right? The other reason that I really like it, and I find this like extremely valuable, is oftentimes, even in end of semester course evaluations, students tend to not be super honest or detailed in their feedback. But when I go through the chat logs, it almost feels like I'm reading their mind because I see exactly what they're struggling with and what they understand and what they don't. And it's such a valuable tool for me to self-reflect and see what can I teach better? What am I doing a decent job at? What areas should I maybe spend more time on? And what areas can I maybe next time go a little faster on? So that's been invaluable for me to see those logs, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Any other question on the chat or virtual TA? And I should point out, um, Notebook LM is totally free, right? So this is something that you can start using today as long as you have a Gmail account. And just to kind of um, quarantine all of my work stuff, I tend to make a fresh Gmail account. So all of this is not on my personal Gmail. It's on cstubs.fdu@gmail, right? Where I made a specific Gmail for all of my work stuff. Um, so any questions on the virtual TA? Okay. So we talked about the source. We talked about the chat. Next, I want to talk about the studio. So this is where I think Notebook LM really is above and beyond all other educational AI platforms is this studio section. So with the sources, I can create a whole bunch of different pieces of content. So I'm just going to go through each one and kind of show you what they look like. Some of them take a minute or two to generate. So for purposes of this meeting, I pre-generated a bunch and we can go through them. So first is the audio. Here you can select whether you want a deep dive, a critique, a brief, a debate, and you can give it additional instructions. And then you can give it a length. So this is, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes typically, and then you can choose your language. I typically do deep dive, and then here I'll type in something like focus on chapter 4 and focus not on the math, but on the high level concepts, and a deeper understanding of this section, and this section, which I'm planning on teaching. This is super valuable as read ahead material for my students. So again, if you go to Web Campus, you go to course documents, I have these AI podcasts for each chapter. So I have never had success convincing students to read a chapter beforehand so that they can engage in conversation in my classroom, but they are more than willing to listen to an AI generated podcast either from the walk from their dorm to the classroom or on their commute, right? And so I make these between, 5 and 10 minutes, and it's at least a primer. So when they walk into the classroom, they've just listened to two people having a conversation about that chapter, high level topics, and they become much more engaged in the classroom. And it has really been successful, especially our students, which would, there's a lot of commuter students. They have really enjoyed listening to these on the drive to campus. And so I'm just going to play one of them as an example.
Hola.
Oh, here we go.
You know this. Yeah.
Let's see. Sorry, it's a little laggy, I think, on Zoom. Are you able to hear that?
No soldering wires together. We are purely doing opportunity development. So, where do we even start? Well, Madsen and Sorensen describe this stage as characterizing the problem you're trying to solve. And before you can even think about what the product looks like, you really need a foundation. Right. In the text, they call this the project objective statement.
Can you all hear that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So that's what it sounds like. It genuinely sounds like two people having a conversation, right? So it's very approachable for students, and as long as you prompt it in a way that makes sense for your course, I think it's been really helpful. All of these, I should say, I generally create in English as well as Latin American Espanol, which has been really helpful for a lot of the ESL students I have in the classroom, right? So there's going to be a podcast generated for English and a podcast generated in Spanish. And a lot of the ESL students will listen to both. And it really helps bridge that gap. And I think it's a great tool for equity in the classroom. So I can show you what that sounds like in Spanish.
Una muy cálida bienvenida a este análisis profundo. Es un verdadero placer compartir esta sesión hoy. Hola. Sí.
Again, just a podcast students can listen to on the way to class. Similar to the audio podcast, there are video explainers. So you can think of these as a a few minute um, kind of YouTube-esque or TikTok-esque slideshow video, quick
Podría
understanding
funcionar.
kind of
Pero bueno,
explainer
esta
video.
idea es solo el comienzo. Para que esa idea no se quede en el aire y llegue a ser algo concreto, algo que la gente pueda usar.
And again, these you can make in over 80 different languages, right? So depending on what the demographics of your students look like, you can make these simply by selecting explainer. You can select your language here, and then you can even select style. I typically do auto, but you can even kind of select here. You hit generate, you wait 2 minutes, and it's created. It's really that simple, right? So that's the kind of read ahead material, the audio and the video. You can also do a number of things that will help you in your material preparation. So things like taking chapter 4 and making a slideshow, right? Where it actually, in about a minute or two, creates a full PowerPoint presentation that is a great starting point. It gets you kind of 60% of the way there if you're developing new slideshows for a class. And then you can simply just download it as a PowerPoint format and then edit it. And that's a great, again, starting point for a slideshow. It generates quizzes that you can use. It's it's accurate maybe 80 to 90% of the time, so check all the questions and answers. But again, great starting point, right? And I will generate these even with classes that I've been teaching for 5 years because this gives me kind of a new perspective on things that I could ask or ways to frame certain questions, right? Keep going down. It generates flashcards that you can share with students for specific topics. So again, you can prompt it. And this was chapter 40 flashcards that I can share with the students so that they can, there's no answers. So it's just kind of potential questions that I could ask on an exam. And this is really helpful for them as a study assistant. It also creates infographics. So if you allow your students to have, the one-page cheat sheet, you can generate these. These take, about 1 minute. You just click generate infographic, and then they can write notes on the back, right? But this is kind of a quick explainer of the point of that chapter, right? High level. And again, this infographic can be in multiple different languages. So if I scroll down, I think it's this one. So this one I also did in Spanish. So students can use that as well. And so if you generate each one for each chapter, by the end, they kind of have this list of quick reference guides. And then when they go off into industry and they get a question, that might be pertinent to chapter 3 of this textbook, they can have this to refer to, right?
Christopher, may I ask
Yep,
a question?
sure.
So who create those videos or those documents? Is it from a book like publisher?
Yeah, so I just uploaded, it's an OER textbook, right? So I just took the PDF, I dropped it in, and then that's the knowledge base that it's creating all this, right?
Is
So I
there
drop it in
any
here.
like a copy rights or plagiarism in here? I don't know.
Yeah, so that's a good point. If you have an OER textbook, it usually has the license information, and as far as I know, all OER textbooks, it's fine to use it in this manner. If you have something from, Elsevier or Springer, where it's kind of a non-open source material, I don't think you can legally do this. So what I typically do in those cases, because I do teach class, like I have a materials engineering class where I don't use an OER textbook. Um, for that, instead of loading in the textbook, I load in all of my lecture notes and
So
lecture
you,
slides.
excuse me. So you using these, I mean, did you see anything like on the students, anything, let's say they get used to of just listening a short video, kind of, and also those videos usually, there's YouTubers. Uh,
Mhm.
those YouTubers, they do a lot of stuff. They eliminating a lot of important stuff. They make a topic to be so simple.
Yep.
And I see these are my students now. They go, they listen and YouTuber, then they say, let's take data structure. Let's say data structures linked list. So they listen a video, let's say it is like 5 minutes. And they eliminating a lot of important stuff on those videos. And then the students, they think, oh, sure, I know it now. I'm good on it. Did you see any of that feeling on those videos or? I,
No, so like I mentioned, I use this all as read ahead material, or review material before an exam. I don't use this by any means instead of the meat and potatoes of the lecture, right? This is to help students um, where it makes sense, right? And I'm not saying do this where, like in all cases, I'm just saying this is how I do it. And you're more than welcome to use any or none or all of the tools that I'm showing today. Um, but in my experience, this helps the students show up to class um, not from point zero, right? And so, yeah, like for sure, the podcasts and the video explainers aren't going to go into the level of detail that my lecture does. But at least it's not the first time they're hearing the terms I'm saying, right? So when I talk about requirements verification matrices, they've heard that term before, and so it just helps move everything along. And so I've really, and I'm not saying this um, like I don't have skin in the game using this in my classroom. I've really only ever seen positive effects with this stuff.
I have a question.
Sure.
What kind of percent compliance do you have when students, when you post those? Do you find that students, majority of them are listening, or are you finding that they listen and then don't show up for class? Because I think they have gotten the gist of the lecture.
So I specifically like for the podcast, for instance, um, here I do like the short length, so they're like 5 minutes, and I've never had a student think that a 5 minute podcast could replace a 2.5 hour lecture. Um, and so I haven't had that happen. Um, I I do think there are some students that no matter what you do,
Mhm.
they're not gonna use the tools you give them, right? And there are students that probably don't need this and don't like it, right? And that's totally fine. This isn't anything I mandate. It's just another tool in their tool belt in their education that they can use if it helps them and they can ignore if it doesn't, right? I try not to make AI mandatory or integral into my class as much as a supplement to their education.
So can you get any metrics on who have actually accessed the podcasts?
Yeah,
The number
so
of students?
at the end of each of my semesters, I do surveys and ask the students, and I have them mention it where it makes sense in like the course evals, and the majority of students have been using this and find it useful. I don't have exact numbers, but I know just anecdotally, I would say out of a class of 20, maybe 10 to 15 are using it. Any other questions before I keep moving on? Okay. So I'm not going to go through all these tools. I just kind of wanted to give you a flavor of what is possible, right? I encourage you just to mess around with this and see what makes sense in your um, educational workflow and what doesn't. The only other thing that I would want to show you here is the ability that we have at the FDU Center for AI to create custom GPTs for your students as well. So this is one that we made for my materials engineering course. And this is a research paper helper. So this is um, in my ENGR 3211, they have to write a semester-long paper on 3 different materials that they plan on using in their job when they graduate and why those materials make sense in their industry, right? So it's like, I am planning on using steel, and here is the bonding structure that gives steel the properties that make sense in aerospace because I want to go into aerospace, right? Something along those lines. And so we've created this GPT that the students use, and it's strictly a Socratic tutor, right? So it's programmed or trained so that it doesn't give any answers. Students ask it questions, and it will only respond in probing questions to make them think deeper about the process. And then as they begin to write the paper, it doesn't suggest wording. It just looks at the paper and says, hey, have you thought about adding this section? Or this doesn't seem clear. Maybe think about another way to say it, right? And so guiding them as hands-off as possible, but 1 part thought coach, 1 part tutor, 1 part writing coach. And I piloted this last semester and the students enjoyed it. They submitted again the chat logs as well as the paper. I found that I think there's this big fear that students are just going to say, write the paper, and it writes the paper. What I found when I actually implemented this and looked through the logs is that students are really having thought-provoking conversations with a bot like this, where they are really going back and forth and saying, well, I haven't thought about this, or I thought about this, or could you point me to some references that talk about this or that? I was really blown away at how this enabled the decision making and the research more than it was used simply as a crutch or a shortcut. So if you ever want something like this, again, the AI Center is more than happy to build custom GPTs for your classroom. And we can work with you to figure out whatever application makes sense. And then you, of course, test it, make sure it's exactly what you want, and then you can release it to the students via web campus. Um, so I wanted to leave this link just as a reminder if you want to play around with it, but that's generally all I had. I just wanted to show you a couple examples of how I'm using it in the classroom just to give you some ideas. And then I wanted to leave the last 15, 20 minutes just open to questions or discussion, and see what you all thought about just AI in the classroom and how it may help or hinder you. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I guess I want to go back to something you said. You kind of indicated what you're presenting. Well, maybe I interpreted it as what you're presenting is much easier to apply kind of in more verbal technical subjects. But do you have a recommendation? Let's say you were teaching, a heat transfer course where you had to solve some partial differential equation by separation of variables, and you really do need to get kind of technical mathematically. Have you thought about, what to do in those kind of like what would you recommend, if anything, in those kinds of cases?
Yeah, so I have really math intensive courses where it's the math's not like crazy hard or anything, but it is the majority of the homeworks and the exams are pure calculus, right? In those cases, the AI TAs or virtual tutors really focus on the process and the concepts, right? So instead of like if you give it an algebra problem, and you say, help me solve this, right? You're not gonna, or most likely not gonna get good results if you want it to step by step walk the student through. But you can have it ask the student questions like, I see that there's, exponents and parentheses. Which one should we do first, right? Like, let's talk through order of operations and ask the student probing questions to help them work through um, the problem. I haven't tested it with partial differential equations, but I'm more than happy to prototype something if you want to work together on that. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, we'll toss it, right? Like we don't want to be doing anything that doesn't work, but there's no harm in trying.
Yeah, no, I was just giving that as I don't have any particular interest in that. Just giving that as an
Mm,
example of something
sure.
I know exists in a mechanical engineering course, say.
Yep.
Um, I mean, I find that a lot of my students do just go to you know, the step by step that ChatGPT gives them, and it's been getting better. I have to say, it's not, it's not perfectly able to solve, say, my mathematics exams, but it can pass. And that's, to me, that's what's troublesome is, um, you know, when students use it sort of to do the homework, which to me is a large part of what they should be, focusing on in the course, right? I'm kind of the guide in the classroom, but a lot of the work gets done in the homework. And it's just sort of very hard to police. I've given up kind of trying to police that thing. And so, yeah, strategies for, how to how to how to promote that kind of, behavior as opposed to the just, it's very easy to get it to do it step by step in Chat GPT, and it's very difficult to say how a student came by that. So I just wonder what you think about that, bridging that. You know, to me, I almost give away in some sense the 10% say. Um, uh, homework grade, and try, to implore the students to, do what you're saying, basically, right? You can use it to try to understand the steps in the process as opposed to just, right, getting it to do the steps in the process for you to get through the homework, because that's only 10% of the grade, and 90% of the grade is in class and, not with an LLM. So I'm just wondering, like, how you know what I mean?
Yeah. So
Enforce is a strong word, but how you motivate students to get there as opposed to where a lot of them seem to be.
yeah. So I guess let me give you a kind of a two-part answer, right? First is there are students that like and this is just my personal opinion, right? Um, there are students that are going to cheat no matter what, right? Like when I was an undergrad, there were students that would pay English majors to write papers for them, right? Now
Sure,
they're just paying
sure,
ChatGPT monthly
sure.
fee to write papers
Yeah.
for them, right? Like there there are just going to be students that do that and will find a way to usurp the system, right? And I know Professor Lewis always jokes that like students will spend 30 hours cheating on something that would take 2 hours to just do the right way, right? Um, so I don't have a good answer for those students, right? But for the majority of my students, I've found that if there's no guidance, they'll go to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is more than willing to give them a shortcut. If you provide them an alternative, like a curated alternative, and you say, instead of going to ChatGPT, right on Web Campus, there is a trained AI that is specifically trained on my lecture notes and on like you can't see the source material, but it's trained on my previous exams from previous years, and it's trained on my previous homeworks, and it is tailored to this course. They are more likely to go to that than ChatGPT. And once they're there, you now can curate that experience, right? Like you can create that walled garden um, experience. Does that make sense? And again, that's purely anecdotal with my students, and your mileage may vary, but that's what I've found. And I guess the third part is explaining to students the point of all this. So the analogy I always use with the mechanical engineers is that AI is essentially like putting a motor on a bicycle, which is great if you're using that bicycle to commute because you're just trying to get from point A to point B. It's terrible if you're using that bicycle to train for a triathlon because like you're not using your muscles now, right? And so explaining this is the point of this assignment, and this is what I'm trying to develop. Like, this is the skill I'm trying to get you to develop, and here's why. Um, Along with that curated environment, again, just anecdotally, has really worked well for me. And students have not been using just the general help me cheat chat GPTs.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the discussion. I'm curious to hear if anybody else has experience with that.
Yeah. Jay?
Okay, thank you. So I just wanna thanks for all the good information. That's very helpful. I just want to highlight one thing I add in my chat. So the issue is these days, students are trying to use a ChatGPT, trying to use AI to get an easy grade, to make a fast move, right? And if they start to rely on these even undergrad level courses, and they will have a big trouble when they get a job and then later on move forward. So they will lose capability in independent thinking, solver, right? And if they're taking FEP exam, they will not be able to do it because of they rely on ChatGPT and other sources and during their learning process. So I strongly prohibited this procedure as we use AI. I understand AI is important for everybody, but in specific engineering discipline, it's not applicable for this. So it will discourage our student as they're growing as an engineer, like junior engineer, their learning process, right? Past 10 years, 20 years, it's okay, they can use it. But right now, I always put this as in my syllabus, and I discourage to use the AI because as an instructor, it's okay. But to the student, I think we have to be very, very careful about this. So just that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to make it extremely clear that I'm showing you this as an option, but like there's zero directive that I've ever heard working in the Center for AI that there's any sort of push where they want people or don't want people using this in the classroom, right? It is a tool in your tool belt as a professor to use as you see fit. And like professor classroom autonomy, I think, is paramount in this whole discussion, right? Like, if it makes sense for you, great. If it doesn't, totally fine. Um, so I want to make sure that's clear. Um, I guess, Jay, the way I would frame what you're saying, at least the way I do frame with my students is like this is an amazing opportunity for them, right? Um, I wish that when I graduated undergrad and was looking for a job, um, all of the people I was competing for and all the people that were in job interviews, scheduled right before and after, used AI a ton and couldn't answer in-person questions like in the interview. If students do not become reliant on AI and graduate with these skills, like the traditional engineering skills, they have such an advantage over their peers who are using AI, right? So using it in a proper way as a thought coach, as a writing coach, as a guide, not as a shortcut, I think gives these students such a competitive advantage over the vast majority of college graduates from other universities, right?
I like the Socratic method. I find that that's really how I use ChatGPT. When I'm trying to learn a new skill or a new program, or I'm trying to learn how to program, and just asking questions and in kind of a conversation, maybe we need to teach our students how to do that, and that will encourage critical thinking and not memorizing. So from what I'm gathering, that's part of what this tool does. If you set it up right, that it will challenge the students to think what's the next step. So I kind of like it, but I do agree that Chat GPT, if it's just going to be solving problems for you now, you've learned nothing. And you may have gotten a grade, but then when you move to the next challenging course, you don't have that skill set and you're just setting yourself up for failure. And somehow we need to get that point across to our students.
Yeah, and maybe this is a false equivalency, but I remember when I was in grad school, Chegg was really popular, right? And I think since AI, Chegg has kind of fallen out of grace. But um, there would be the textbook question, and it would be step-by-step guide, and you would have to manually click next step, next step, next step. And it would eventually give you the answer, but if you could use it as a check whether you got it right on your own along the way, or you could use it as a shortcut, right? And there were students in my class that used it both ways. After graduation, I think the students that used it the right way probably ended up doing better, right?
So Chris, on the top of this, I recently had a lecture in my senior design class using AI in ethics. So if think about if a student's doing using AI, create PowerPoint and create the videos, right? Just do the senior design, let them do it, right? They don't get anything. So I have to be very careful about that. So I brought that AI ethics using in our senior design classes. I taught our students saying that if you ever use an AI, you don't gain anything. That's the whole bottom point. So because another reason is that ASCE in 2024, we announced that we should not use as a professional, as it is only a tool. We don't rely on it. And until we have a senior level of justification we have, people cannot use as a professionals. That's a clearly statement in the ASCE. I believe ASAME the same thing. So we really have to be careful in the using AI because when I'm looking at the document, and this is really clearly state that students should not use it, especially in the senior design classes. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between um, AI in the product and AI in the process, right? And hopefully I've made the distinction somewhat clear over the past, 55 minutes of like I think it's really beneficial for students to use um, the right type of AI in the process of learning and in the process of especially mechanical design, or the class I teach. But yeah, it shouldn't be AI generated product at the end of the day, right? And that distinction between like the thought coach and the shortcut, right?
I think even process, students are having thinking process from starting from the end, right? So as an instructor, I leading students say thought process A to B, right? I'm leading, giving them a hint time to time, right? And think about this way, this research this way toward to the conclusion for the B or C, right? Through that. If we use it as a starting process, AI will do that for you. So students have no space to think about that. So I think we also have to be very careful about this too.
Sure, sure. And I'll reiterate one more time, right? Like whatever makes sense in your class, right? These are tools at your disposal that I want you to be aware of, but that's it, right?
Right. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
So I have a question, more practical one. How if one wanted a custom program, like maybe to read lab reports and help students write lab reports, and once they're written, critically analyze their lab report before they hand it in, how would we make that request?
Sure, just shoot me an email and depending on whether it's student facing or faculty facing, kind of drives what tool we use, right? So if it's only faculty or staff using it, we tend to move towards Fred GPT. If you want students to have access, we're probably going to do either Gemini or Chat GPT. And I'll build it out. I'll prototype it on my end. I'll send it over to you. You prototype it. We iterate until you think it's good, and then you can send it out to the students.
Okay.
But it's a fully collaborative process, and we've done probably a dozen or two at this point. And we got it down to kind of start to finish. It takes, I don't know, 5 to 6 days usually.
Oh, good. And what's your availability this summer?
Yeah, so send it over. Happy to help. Any other questions?
Dr. Stubbs, Reggie, I found just a comment. I saw you have shown some tools in the website. One of them was Suno, SUNO,
Yep.
I think, which is used for music creations. And my experience with it, you give any script, it's going to create a music for you. and it will give beautiful, very beautiful background music. But the thing, it is killing the, from the viewpoint of a lyricist, it's killing the music. So there are such, problems there with some of the AI tools. Anyway, coming back to my experience, one of the student was working on a Go project, a robotics project using Python programming. And I gave her a challenge. I told her to do something. She knew Python programming well. She spent hours and hours. Finally, she decided to use ChatGPT, and she was able to come up with a solution. So these tools will help us, but if you're going to use it from the beginning, it's not good. But if it is a, for example, a person who knows Python programming well and she or he uses it for enhancing or finding the solution, that will be a good thing for the person. So that's my comment.
Yeah, I totally agree, right? Like we all have calculators. It doesn't mean that we should stop teaching times tables,
Yes.
right? Like I totally agree. Just because we have a tool that can do something for us doesn't mean we should be using it as a replacement for our brains.
I want to make a comment if you let me to do it. It looks like FT or all the across the higher education, and they let AI to help faculty to write papers. Okay, and you also showed FTU has it too. And AI help us to write a paper. AI help us to apply to a grant. AI do a lot of stuff for like faculty, and then why not for students? Why why we using then you don't let students to use it then? I mean it's an complicated problem these days. Okay, when you I mean I read papers in AI area. A lot of them are AI written by AI. I mean you see that. Okay. And the higher education itself, it is they're using AI a lot, but on the other hand, when it is students, the universities, they are a kind of struggling. We should let AI to be used in the schools or not? I mean, that's a biggest problem I think the higher education these days are having.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly don't have an answer to that question.
It is
I
not a
don't think
question, I'm saying.
anyone does right now of where that ethical line is drawn. I would only go back to one of my earlier slides that says that one of the technical tracks at the symposium on April 15th is dedicated to the ethics and repercussions of AI, and I think it's going to be a great session, and
I mean, you can
I
ask
encourage you to
AI.
attend.
I mean, you can ask AI to write a paper about AI. You can give them a data, any data, just pick up a data from any place. Even you can ask them to make your own data and to write a paper in a week. You have a paper,
Yep.
but it is not the real research, real base of anything.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I have one relevant comment actually. I began to allow students to use not even GPT, but any AI like Gemini or General GPT for their dynamics tutoring. I just allowed them to do it, and I just asked them to use it as a Socratic tutor. And what I see is most of them actually use it ethically and responsibly. And there are two specific students who are obviously cheating, but I know these two, they would cheat anyway. So I think there is more benefit than harm. Smartest and strongest students will not use it anyway. It's the students who are in the middle, and I think if they are not coming to office hours anyway, at least getting help from GPT is better than not getting any help. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I would just I would echo that when I look through the logs, like there are questions that they are asking the virtual TA that I think they wouldn't ask me, right? Whether it's they're embarrassed to look stupid in front of classmates or they just don't feel comfortable asking. I think they do open up more to these systems. And and again, anecdotally, in my experience, it's been nothing but beneficial.
Yeah, I think we are in experimental phase.
Yep. Um, so if there's nothing else, thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Um, I'm happy to chat with anybody, help them set any of this stuff up. If you have any questions or concerns about implementation or anything like that, please really don't hesitate. I'm happy to chat with anybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chris, for your time. Learn a lot.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank
Bye.
you.